You're
Oh, is
live,
it
dude.
on now? Hi. I do that all. That's pre-show ritual. So, ladies and gentlemen, hi. This is probably the third time today that you've had the unfortunate pleasure of seeing me. 3 videos, 24 hours, 2 today. I'm Dallas Winston, Bloody Elbow. I'm with Zane Simon, and we are going to tackle the last damn card of the week. This is Saturday's Ultimate Fight Night 43 to Huna versus Marquardt / New Zealand. It's one of those. Zane,
Yo,
talk to us. Talk to us. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm not all that enthused for this card. I gotta say, there are 3 fights worth watching on the whole thing, and everything else is super missable.
So I assume the reason you didn't say 4 is that the Whitaker Rhodes match on the main card?
No, that'd be the Tahuna Marquardt match.
Oh, really?
Yeah, what are you really gonna watch there? You gonna watch 2 guys who've already totally failed to make it to the highest level, or who are not at the highest level anymore, battle it out for a scrap of relevancy?
Well, that's a pessimistic outlook on the
I'm
match.
I'm just saying of all like
I'm
I
just
mean
fucking with
they're both Marquardt's on what, a 3 fight losing streak, and Tahuna's on a 2 fight losing streak.
you. I
So
assume you'd agree to Huna. I'm not. I haven't lost. Actually, I really haven't lost hope on either. But I actually think this is going to be definitive. I think Marquardt's going to have problems dealing with Tahuna's range and offense. I think Marquardt's going to have a lot of trouble generating his own offense against Tahuna.
I think that if this fight lasts longer than a minute and Marquardt's still conscious, I'll be really impressed.
So I'm getting the vibe you're picking Marquardt for the main
Yeah,
event then.
definitely that's the vibe radiating out of my pores right now.
All right, but let's not be
Let's not
silly.
jump ahead of ourselves
Let's
anyway.
not be big turkeys and go backwards.
No.
Please expect me, everyone, to be a little bit more unusual and weirder than normal. Just a quick revision. Laptop bad, didn't work, had to order a new one, rushed it in. Just overall, the process has not been smooth. It's not been a smooth transition.
I gotta say, you more weird than normal at this point is as weird as normal.
Even I'm confused by that, so I don't know whether to thank you or cuss you out. Let's just let it roll. What do you think? Are you all right
Yeah,
with
no,
that?
we can roll with that.
I'll do my usual, which is kind of a dumb, confused little drill coming up. All right, so as I said to you before the show, we're going to be leaning on you pretty heavy. If there is some information to be learnt from this preliminary card, for those of you who are all excited to get up at 2:30 in the morning Eastern time, or stay up late if you're on some other time zone, I can't imagine it's going to be a big hit. But first, actually, the first bout is probably one of the few. If I had to pick one to watch, it would probably be this one because I like Jean Vellante. He's taken on Sean O'Connell. Thoughts on the matchup and a refresher on Sean O'Connell and his mixed martial arts identity.
Well, Sean O'Connor. I mean, I would be more interested in this fight if it was John Vellante versus somebody else. Sean O'Connell's. I don't know. I feel bad because I've never been impressed by his fighting. I've never been impressed by his performance and to crib GSP, and I'm still not. But I mean, he was better than advertised against Jimmo last time out when he was able to press Jimmo a lot and crack him a few times.
Before he got
Um,
knocked out
yeah, before getting knocked out horribly. I
in the
mean,
first round.
he's aggressive, but he also tends to throw both his hands at once. Like he's so, his striking's so basic that like the desperation to close distance and get into the clinch and drag a guy down is like he just basically throws his hands out there at a guy, and if they connect, then he can get onto him and kind of latch onto him and try to drag him out. But the thing is that he tends to get drawn into a lot of brawls and firefights, so I mean, even that's not terribly successful. So he tends to do a lot of face forward, both hands out, chin extended. I'm coming for you, and that's exactly how Jimmo knocked him out. Was just he did that one time too many, and Jimmo caught him flush and put him down. And I can't see Vellante not having the same success.
So check me on Vellante because I've kind of liked the guy. Not that I thought he was destined for anything spectacular, but that he would kind of be able to hold his own in the UFC. Good boxer, underrated wrestling, I'd say, even though he doesn't use it that much. If you had to, I mean, any corrections or additions you want to make to that, go ahead. And if you
Terrible
had
gas
to,
tank.
yeah, I was going to say, if you had to get a bead on one thing that's been his problem, has it been fading after the first round?
Well, it certainly is his problem after that Fabio Maldonado fight. I mean, there's nothing good to say about that. He took a fight that he was winning handily and just fell apart. And then whereas in the Oven St. Preux fight, he started really slow and kind of came on late and was doing better late in that fight when he got eye poked. I mean, he still lost it the whole way, but he was actually starting to mount a little bit of offense when he went down to a jab in the eye. So, I mean, the beat on him is definitely that against the guys like Cody Donovan and Sean O'Connell, like he's definitely like he deserves to be in the UFC. He's more than physically talented enough for it, but I don't know that he's going to find a lot of success against anyone else who really deserves to be there too. Like he's going to win against the guys who just kind of get brought up on short notice or who get brought in as filler like O'Connell, but I don't know that he'll ever beat guys like Oven St. Preux or Fabio Maldonado.
So I think we're both agreeing, not trying to sound like dicks, but Sean O'Connell, thus far, just I think doesn't justify anything other than kind of a show me,
Yeah.
like if you're another way to say it is bottom of the barrel. Again, don't mean to be offensive there. So do you expect Vellante to get a knockout here? Because I would
Yes.
probably pick him by strike stoppage.
Yeah, I would definitely pick him by knockout. He's got the power. He's shown the technical boxing when he's in full, like, when he's feeling strong and confident in his hands and not fading. He's got the technical striking. He's got the power. And O'Connell, like I said, he has that style where he's just going to bull in, leading with his head. And, it's the perfect way to get knocked out, especially as you start to get up into the higher weight classes.
And didn't he wrestle at Hofstra and play football as well?
Yeah, he did go to Hofstra, and yeah, he had a good football and wrestling career there. So, I mean, he's
Yeah, so
definitely a great athlete in terms of pure like physical ability. It just doesn't translate into cardio necessarily.
and we got to move on because I wanted to do this show quickly, and we're
Yeah.
spending all kinds of time on this first one. But I can't recall him having a good first round and get completely gassing out and having it being that tangible and identifiable as he did against Maldonado.
No, the Maldonado thing, I think that was heat and maybe a bad cut and maybe the travel and like just you know, a whole mess of circumstances coming together to make an exceptionally bad performance there.
All right, moving on to the next one. Ian Entwistle,
Hmm.
some kind of medieval sorcerer, perhaps,
Yep.
versus Daniel Hooker. And I absolutely know nothing about either of these
I
guys.
was gonna
So
say,
it's,
don't try to posit Hooker's profession from his last name.
yeah, you'll notice I just kind of swept past that one. But this is all you, so enlighten us, por favor.
All right, both. So Hooker's from New Zealand and Whistle's from England, but he trains out of he trains out of one of I think it's the Thai camp, one of the bigger like Fuck It Top Team down there,
In the
Thailand.
UK?
Well, he's from the UK, but he trains out of
So
Thailand.
either Phuket or Tiger Muay Thai,
Yeah.
probably.
One of those. So he is like of the region down there, is what I'm saying. I mean, that's why he's on this card, is because he's kind of a regional guy for the South Pacific. And Hooker's like he's had a bunch of fights on the New Zealand circuit. He's decent, well-rounded kind of guy. Although a lot of the Aussie and New Zealand guys, like we saw with the recent Tough Nations, are not getting wrestling. Like they're just not getting the wrestling training to either offensively or defensively. So that's kind of a big hole for Hooker. And Entwistle's big whole thing is he is a aggressive submission grappler, like flying scissor heel hook, leg locks out of the gate, will throw, he won't even strike at all. He'll just he's sort of like in the Imanari mold of like, I'm just gonna come at you and dive for your leg first thing I do every fight.
Sweet.
Yeah, he should be.
I
So
like that.
I like it too, and I'm picking him. I'm picking Entwistle to win because he has that real aggressive submission offense, and Hooker, he's well rounded, but he hasn't shown that he's really like gonna blow anyone out of the water with anything. And so I think if he gives Entwistle a lot of time to work with and a lot of space to work with, then that plays right into Entwistle's submission game.
All right. I'm going to try to start getting in the habits of reading off the betting lines for these, even though I didn't do it in the show that that I did with you and Josh.
That's fine.
Volante's heavily favored, minus 300. We get all these odds from the aggregator, bestfightodds.com. It's really the only betting site I visit. And they have no relationship with us, so, I mean, there you go, free plug, or give me a fucking fruit basket. I'll take a fruit basket. Daniel Hooker and Entwistle is fairly close. It looks like, actually, Hooker overall is favored, minus 20, ranging up to minus 30, whereas Entwistle is anywhere from plus 100 to minus 105. So that one's a little bit more of a toss-up.
Yeah.
Next matchup, Neil Magny, Rodrigo Goiano De Lima. And you're going to have to help me out with this version of the... And by the way, I don't know if I told you the other De Lima. Is that Rosario De Lima, the good kickboxer? Used to fight in Strikeforce, I believe.
Oh, you mean the light heavyweight?
Light heavyweight,
from
yeah.
The recent Tough season?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was on Tough either. I used to follow that guy quite a bit. He's an old scouting report guy from the Leland and Smoothie
He's
days.
in the UFC now, so you can watch.
That's when his name came up. I was like, all right, I don't know this dude. And then once he walked out into the octagon, I felt like a real jackass because I knew him quite well. Tell us about this De Lima, regardless.
So this De Lima is actually the brother of Michael Prazeres, I believe. And he's a jungle fight champion. So that's a good notch in your belt to come in with.
Man, they're really going jungle fight champion.
Oh yeah, pretty much anytime somebody wins a jungle fight title, they are basically going to be on a UFC card within the year.
I'm cool with that too.
Yeah, no, it's a great organization. Their champions have done really well. It's it's a good talent pool to draw from. But and he's getting kind of a crappy matchup here in Magny because Magny is really a good, solid welterweight in the UFC right now. He's a high output, aggressive kickboxer who works well at range, has developed a little bit of a takedown game to go with it, and he looks like he's really kind of coming into his own. And Goiano De Lima, unfortunately, like his biggest strength is that he's really big and strong. Like that's his thing. He's Rodrigo Monstro is his nickname, and he's a big, strong dude, but he's not really polished anywhere. Like his striking's not great, his takedowns aren't great. He's a good, powerful, top control grappler when he gets there with some decent ground and pound too. But he hasn't shown the kind of wrestling that's going to trouble Magny and get him down real easy. So I would say that Magny's got a pretty easy 3-round kickboxing match to put on here and just kind of stay at range and pepper him.
Yeah, and Magny, I actually kind of took note of him on Tough because I was pretty impressed. I don't remember who it was that he fought, but he was real scrappy. He's got that ridiculous reach length. And even over the course of the show, he seemed to improve his takedown defense and defensive scrambling a little bit. Kind of came in lukewarm, but now it looks like he's picking up momentum. So
well, yeah,
I'm kind of on board.
He beat Tim Means just, last fight out.
And that was shocking.
Yeah.
At least to me.
Yeah, I mean, Magny's actually become like a decent mid-tier welterweight in the division right now. He's a guy who's gonna compete with almost anyone in the division. He may not beat everybody, but you put him up against a guy right at the bottom of the top 15 or so, and he'll be in that fight.
Who was one of his early submission losses? Was that Trinaldo? I remember
Uh,
thinking it was a bad matchup for him, but
oh no, Sergio Moraes.
yep, Moraes, yep.
And the Panthers, awesome. Honestly,
Yeah.
just a great grappler. And I mean, unfortunately, he's been injured, so nobody gets to see him, like see how great he is right now. But there's no shame in getting submitted by Sergio Moraes.
Yep, I agree. All right, so moving on, another tough battle. Chris Indich versus Vick Kruczek. Refresh everyone's memory on these
So,
two.
so these guys were both coming off the Tough Nations. Weren't like they weren't finalists or anything like that. I think they both made it to the semifinal round, maybe. Uh, Off a pretty weak season of Tough, and honestly, I'm just kind of shocked they're still here. They both lost their first fight in the UFC, and usually, if you come off a tough season and you get matched up with another tough fighter and you lose that first fight, you're gone. Like they just they don't tend to keep anyone who loses off their first fight out of Tough if
Were
you're
there
not in
higher
the finals.
expectations for? Sorry to interrupt you. For Indich, I feel like there was a little
No,
bit of a no.
no, no, not at all.
I believe
Indich
you.
is one of those guys who has a ton of heart and is really tough and is really gritty, but just doesn't seem to physically have the capability for competing in the UFC. He's just slow and doesn't have any power in his strikes and doesn't have anything. I mean, he's tough as hell. There's no question about that. He took a hell of a beating from Richard Walsh in his last fight, but it was basically just 3 rounds of him getting beat to a pulp. So it was not a great experience. And Grujic was a little more competitive against oh god, who did he face off against? Nordine Taleb, and Taleb's a pretty decent. He's a pretty strong fighter. He's been around. He's a pretty solid vet. But like a lot of the Aussies have shown, he really lacks wrestling. He just does not have a wrestling base to work from at all, and so Taleb was just able to dump him all fight and keep him down. But Grujic looks like he can strike a bit. He's got a bit of pop in his hands, and he's just physically a better fighter than Indich, who I don't think is going to be around for long.
All right, so this one's a pick 'em. I forgot to list the odds for the last bout. Magny's heavily favored, as high as minus 320 up to minus 270. Indich and Grujic is pretty split. Minus 110 for both on one site, and then kind of a smattering of plus 100s, minus 107. So odds makers see that one as fairly even.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a rough
anything?
fight.
Yeah. Richie Vasilik versus you can help me out on this last or on this next one. Roldan Sangsha'an.
That's as close as anyone's going to get, I think.
Word.
uh, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. This is one of the few things where like I didn't even do the signing announcement for Roldan that Anton got that. So I haven't really watched much tape on him at all, and even if I could, there's not much tape to watch. He's had 3 pro fights in his career, so you really don't know what you're going to get out of him. I mean, you don't know what you're going to get out of somebody with 3 pro fights. That's not a really a or he's had 4. They have him listed with 4 now. So I think
Cool.
they're probably digging a little further into his record and finding a bit more out of it. But he's had
Sherdog
2.
has him at 4-0 for whatever
Yeah.
that's worth.
I think they like a week ago he was listed at 3-0, I
Mm.
think. So I think they're finding more fights for him that he's had in the past. But, and so he's got 2 TKOs and 2 submissions, and what do you know out of that? There's not a lot of, he could come in and do just about anything. And the thing is, for me, is that Richie Vekulik, um, he's not a guy that I've been particularly impressed by either on the regional circuit or in the UFC. And he's probably going to win this fight. I think if it comes down to breaking it down, I think I would expect him to be. He's got a lot more experience, and I'd expect him to be able to kind of wrestle box his way through the fight and put on an okay showing. But I would like to see Song Chan win it because he's a younger fighter with a lot more, coming out of a small market, and I'd just like to see something new out of him.
So kind of unknowns on both sides, right? Because Vasilik fought Scoggins and got
Yeah.
steamrolled, but I have really really super high hopes for Scoggins now.
Yeah, Scoggins is great. So, I mean, it doesn't say anything really bad about him that he got steamrolled by Scoggins, but from what else I've seen of him either, I just haven't seen anything a lot better than that performance to make me say, oh, well, but he's really capable of putting on an incredible performance. He just got hit by a bad fighter. It's just kind of.
I gotcha. Odds makers agree. Vasilik is favored moderately, minus 160, between minus 160 and minus 150. And that brings us to the headliner, if you dare call it that, of the preliminary card, Deshawn Johnson versus Jake Matthews.
Yeah.
Lay it on us.
All right. So Deshawn Johnson, a lot of people may be familiar with that name by now because we did, especially Mookie, did a whole series of articles about his record and the Explode fight team that he's a part of and their uh, less than stellar matchmaking that they've been subject to.
That Deshawn Johnson.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I feel bad for Deshawn because he's not going to have a whole lot to do with the matchups he gets. He's his manager and the fight promotion he's fighting under are probably making most of the fights for him, and he's taking them and he's going out and he's fighting the guys that are in front of him. So I'm not like I don't want that to reflect poorly on him as a fighter.
No, now he's fighting in the UFC because of it. So I don't
Yeah,
hold that against him in the slightest.
yeah. The problem is watching those fights is that it looks like he's got a lot of really bad habits that have not been ironed out because he's been facing such bad competition. So, basically, like, especially the thing is that he looks like he's really comfortable in really bad defensive positions and really like not doesn't work hard in really bad defensive positions because he hasn't faced anyone who will actually challenge him when he puts himself in a bad position.
A little too comfortable, not enough urgency to
Yeah,
get out of it.
like getting somebody on his back looking for a rear naked choke and just kind of hanging out there, letting them put their arm around his neck or, work on cinching, getting hooks in and stuff like that because he's not at all afraid that they're actually going to sink it in.
Maybe
And
he's a pimp. I remember it was among the many humbling moments, when you take a jiu-jitsu class, is the guy who lets you lock on a rear naked choke, says
yeah,
get it tight and let me know, and he'll just hand fight you off the whole time while he's eating his sandwich or something. So
yeah, I mean, and he does appear to have a lot of great raw athletic talent. He looks like he's fast. He looks like he hits hard. He looks like he's in great shape, but his footwork's kind of sloppy. He doesn't appear to have much in the way of striking defense. And like I say, this gets back to the whole idea of like being really comfortable in where you're really easy to get hit, having your hands down and just kind of standing there in front of somebody and but not fighting somebody good enough to actually hit you.
So
So
what's the scoop on Jake Matthews? Because either he's looking good or everybody read Mookie's reporting. Jake Matthews is favored minus 130 to 160, and Deshaun is
Matthews
the underdog.
Matthews came through Tough Nations and he got matched up with Olivier Aubin-Mercier right off the bat, who was one of the eventual finalists, and he put on a good fight against Aubin-Mercier. He's a much better striker. He's got good, solid, powerful technique at range. Um, he grapples well. He deals well with um, that kind of exchange, but he once again doesn't have wrestling. He doesn't have that wrestling base. And so Aubin Mercier, being a really great judo guy, was basically just able to control him in the clinch. And a part of the problem there too is that Matthews, because he comes from a really jiu-jitsu centered camp, he's really comfortable pulling guard. And so that's kind of a bad habit to be in at a higher level, because if you're really comfortable pulling guard and you don't have a really awesome high caliber submission arsenal, that you're going to lock stuff up. And he does go for stuff off his back, but if you're not immediately locking up triangles and arm bars and all that, then you're often dropping rounds. So I
Don't get me
do
started
that is
on the judging.
hmm?
Don't get me started on that whole judging.
I know,
Because
I know.
honestly, I think that whole thing is judging, really.
It is in part, but it's also, I mean, if you're actually not effective, then it's also a problem. If you're getting hit
Yeah,
with
of
heavy
course.
ground and pound, if you're getting controlled in the clinch on the ground, then that is a problem. Like, it's not it can be judging, but it can also just be a technical mistake. Um, and Johnson has shown some decent wrestling, so that's a little bit of a worry. But in general, Matthews is much more well-rounded, much more technically proficient, much more defensively proficient, and I think this is his fight to lose.
All right, so again, Jake Matthews is coming in the favorite on that one. Now we're moving on to the main card. Robert Whitaker and Mike Rhodes. Is this a squash for Whitaker or no?
Um, it's not a squash match for Whitaker at all. Definitely not. Especially not the way Whitaker has looked in his past couple fights. I mean, he got Stephen Thompson's a really shown himself to be a really solid welterweight, but Whitaker wasn't even slightly competitive in that fight. So
I
I
think
think
everyone was expecting a stand-in Wang there, and what's impressed me most about Wonder Boy is he's become an impressive mixed martial artist. Clinch work, takedowns, the whole thing.
well, and what he's showing is that all those years of kickboxing experience, even though he may not have been like out on the K1 circuit, fighting the world's best kickboxers, it's given him a real command and comfort in the cage, where he's really comfortable being in there in a fight. Like, his footwork, his sense of range and timing, all that's just really comfortable. Whereas a lot of guys, they come to MMA late. Maybe they had a little bit of, like, jujitsu, or like Whitaker, a lot of karate experience growing up, but they didn't necessarily have that, like, I'm spending a whole lot of time fighting professionally experience.
Yeah, I always call that jousting, or really, it's pretty much like the standing interplay, all the
Yeah,
subtleties, instead of coming forward and punching in the face.
yeah.
Entries, movement, head movement, pivots, footwork, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I mean that's really what Thompson, like, what he's showing more than anything else is that he's got a lot more comfort in there than a lot of the guys he's fighting. And Whitaker, I mean, the big thing for him is, unfortunately, he's really young. He's not. He's been around for a little while. He got experience, or he got started pretty early for a guy who's only 23. He's already been fighting for 5 years. Um, but he kind of seems to have gotten stuck as pretty much purely a boxer.
In
And
one without a ton of like one-shot power.
well,
Am I right?
he's even got some good power, but he doesn't have a high work rate. He's purely a boxer, and he's not out there like throwing combinations, forcing exchanges out of opponents. He's just kind of sitting back, waiting to counterpunch, looking to work off offense that his opponents give him. And at some point, especially early in your career, when you're not maybe the most technically gifted fighter in the world, I'm not even saying he's a bad technical fighter, but we're not talking like he's not Anderson Silva out there. Then waiting on people a lot tends to mean that you get outworked and outpointed. And I think, honestly, I mean, I'm doing this as a somebody who cribs off Pat Wyman a lot. I'm doing this because I have a lot of faith in him, but I'm kind of tempted to pick Rhodes here to win this fight, because I think Rhodes is a really promising prospect, and he suffered a really bad weight cut in his first fight in the UFC. He cut like 35 pounds in 11 days. And Whitaker and his boxing centered style is a pretty good opportunity for Rhodes to really show that he's a much better fighter than he showed the first time around.
So how
But
does Rhodes beat him? And my curiosity is piqued because I agree with everything you said about Whitaker striking, but I think he's actually an excellent boxing counter striker. I think he's got
Yeah,
good hands.
he is an excellent boxing counter striker. I'm not doubting. I'm just saying that
Sure.
if
And I
but
agree. I was just gonna say I agree with you said. I just wanted to add. I think he's talented at that, but it's not the
yeah,
most efficient way to go out and win a fight. But I
yeah,
was really impressed with not only his takedown defense, but the way he could throw shots and react and still stuff takedowns against Colton Smith.
yeah. So no, I mean I don't think that Rhodes is going to win like a takedown war, but I could see him working with a more complex and busier range striking game. He throws a lot more kicks. He has a lot more diverse arsenal, and I could see him staying outside and working on something just being busier and being a little more complicated. And, I mean, sort of following the Court McGee game plan of just
Being dynamic and
outpointing.
being active.
Yeah, being more active, being the busier fighter, and throwing off Whitaker's timing by having a more complicated striking arsenal. And so I don't know. I mean, I think Whitaker deserves to be favored, but I don't know that he deserves to be the heavy favorite. And I might pick Rhodes for an upset.
For whatever my limited knowledge is worth, I'm gonna pick Whitaker on that one.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
safer pick.
So I guess you already said you didn't like the main event, but I kind of dig all the fights on the main card, and this one might be my favorite of the weekend. Child of Shudo, Hatsu Hioki versus Charles Oliveira. Damn, like where do you start with this one? First of all, I'm going to do I always ask you this. Is there going to be a size difference between these two? Because usually these two are pretty tall feathers.
Uh, Oliveira might be slightly shorter. He's listed at 5'10", and Hioki is 5'11". So there's no markable size difference. Hioki's reach is listed at 73 inches, and so is Oliveira's. So they are basically, even to a certain extent, in style and talent, mirror images of each other.
Let's see. I think Oliveira's striking is much more explosive and potent. I
Yes.
would actually say that Hioki has come so far that his striking is underrated. I think
Yeah.
first, fans of him, we were hoping his striking would be anything but horrendous, and it's always been okay. But I think he's made really notable and encouraging improvements,
Yeah.
especially with his boxing. When
Hmm.
someone's coming at him, being able to, off his back foot, stick a left hand, and I think even threw some hooks in there. I think Oliveira. I finally know a little about a matchup, so I get to talk a bunch here.
Yeah, you should
Oliveira,
talk.
Oliveira blew everybody away when he first came in for being a scrawny little shit, but being really feisty in the clinch. I mean, taking down Escudero, and obviously, so the way I look at Oliveira is he's more offensively potent on the feet and maybe on the ground. I'm going to stick with that, but to me, he leaves himself open a lot
Yeah.
more. Hioki just has, I mean, a technical and solid ground game. Probably one of the best in the UFC right now. Am I way off my rocker for saying that? Can you think of so? To me, this a little bit. I think actually Hioki is going to be a little bit better in the clinch. Oliveira to me is the kind that he'll go for something crazy and put everything into it, and it might work. But if Hioki does not fall into that trap, he's going to just keep grinding away, and he's going to be methodical about applying his technique. But I think both of those things are also their biggest strengths and worst advantages. So Hioki should be very well adept to capitalize on Oliveira being too risky, but at the same time, Hioki can be way too complacent. I actually got really
Yeah.
frustrated as a Hioki mark that this is not the time, to be methodical. He needs to turn it on. So that's me. What's yours?
So who are you picking though?
I'm probably going to take Hioki. I really like both these guys, but I've just been Shudo has always been my favorite fight org. Well, I guess after Pride closed to me, it was definitely Shudo. And I'm still kind of pissy about that Guida loss, man. There's very few fights where afterwards I will be, emotionally distraught in my personal
Yeah.
life for weeks, and that was one of them. So I think it's a close one. I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm leaning Hioki here.
Yeah, I feel like I've been a big fan of Hioki for a long time, but I said it before his fight with Ivan Menjivar, and I'm sticking to it, that if he didn't come out and put on a dominant performance against Menjivar, I was done riding the train. Like I can't do it anymore, and I can't. I gotta pick Oliveira here. I think his aggression is that much. I think his aggression will be the big deciding factor because, quite frankly, it's been since 2009 and Donald Sanchez since Hioki tapped anyone out. And I think if he's not tapping Oliveira out, he's going to be on the losing end of offensive exchanges by not being the busier fighter and the more aggressive fighter. And so I don't know that Oliveira finishes the fight, but I think he'll take the decision.
I would feel confident that Oliveira won't finish just because Hioki is so durable. But
Yeah.
back to that kind of ratio or comparison I said before, how each of their strengths could be their weaknesses. If it did come down to that, personally, I would probably lean towards. I'm still picking Hioki, but
Yeah.
I think the sensible pick is Oliveira because when all else fails in a close fight, the guy that's going balls out and making something happen is the one who's going to get the nod, and perhaps rightfully so. So I think Hioki's a risky pick, but I'm still going to ride. I'm still on that train, son. I'm still going to ride with it. I don't
Yeah,
know
well,
why.
to the death, to the
It's
death.
it's still real to me, damn it. Um, Betting odds. Actually, I haven't even looked at these yet. Oliveira is favored 190, as high as minus 205, and Hioki's that's not too bad. 160, almost in the 160s all the way across the board. So I guess that I would say that kind of mirrors the discussion we just had on it.
Hmm.
Um, Heavyweights. I don't know if you want to call this a co-main event or not, but Jared Rosholt versus Soa Palele. Eugene and I actually knew a little bit about this, so in our Care Don't Care earlier we talked. I'm actually just going to take Palele here. It's not that I think poorly of Rosholt, but I just think we've kind of seen what he can do, and I don't want to say what his limits are, what his abilities are, and he's definitely going to be the better wrestler. But I just think Palele's experience and grappling advantage. I don't know if has Jared fought any really solid submission fighters, to your knowledge.
Not to my knowledge, and like the heavyweight division basically means that he hasn't.
Yeah,
Like
that's.
that's basically the truth of the heavyweight division means he has not.
I felt safe in that assumption, actually. And I'm not saying that Paley's going to submit him because with a wrestler, especially considering his pedigree, I mean, he's an excellent wrestler. And I think just even his wrestling technique alone would keep him out of a lot of danger. But I think Paley's, if it does go on the ground, his transitions, his scrambles, that's really going to be tough for Rochelle to deal with. Give me your thoughts and then tell me. I was just going to say that Rochelle, he's a big boy, but he doesn't seem really, and again, I know we're talking heavyweights, but I guess what I'm saying is I envision Palele being better in scrambles, a little quicker, a little more agile and dexterous in transitions. Is that just me?
I don't know if it's just you or not. I mean, I think maybe it is just you, and I don't mean that. I'm picking Palele too, so I'm not saying that I'm not picking Palele to win. But I think Rochal, I mean, when he gets into wrestling and scrambling mode, he's a pretty agile, fast-footed dude. Like, he scrambles around, he gets in there, he maintains top control, and he maintains that control by being fast and keeping pace with somebody who's moving underneath him. I think he's, not just competent there, but he's quite good at it. What he's not good at is doing damage in any way, shape, or form. And the so the thing with it, and the other big thing he's not good at is striking at all, and most importantly, striking defense. He's probably, I mean, he in some ways he's kind of like he's kind of like a B grade Brock Lesnar in that,
B.
like, the wrestling's really there, and there's even some power in his hands, although Brock Lesnar had a ton of power in his hands. But there's a big question about his ability to actually, when he gets hit, to react well and in a way that's not going to keep him from getting hit a lot more.
Yeah, I
And
thought he was going to get knocked out by Walt Harris in his debut in that first minute. And
yeah,
just like every other function of MMA we talk about, he does seem to be in I'm striking offensively right now, and then until he gets jacked, and then he kind of shells
Well,
up a little
the
bit.
problem is that when he gets hit, or when he thinks he's going to get hit, he turns his head away and he closes his eyes. Like that is just his ingrained reaction. And
It's
even to
it's
that,
it's every human being's. Wouldn't you say that's one of the first hard things you learn in a striking class is
yeah,
you kind of got to stay in the pocket and shell up. You can't just say, "Oh
yeah,
shit,
you
this
can't
could
go
hurt."
like that.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
mean, even Omalanchuk didn't have many opportunities in his fight against Rosholt, but every time that fight was on the feet, Omalanchuk hit him hard at least once. And the thing is, so Pelele, if Pelele's going to get 15 minutes to work with, and he will, because Rosholt is not, like I say, he's not a finisher. He's not somebody who's going to, he doesn't have ground and pound to speak of at all. He doesn't have striking power to speak of. He's just, he's going to get the takedown and he's going to work on maintaining top control. And he's going to stay active. I mean, he's kind of like Chael Sonnen in that way. He's going to stay active enough to win round after round, but you're gonna get all the time to work with if and Pelele giving him all that time to work with at heavyweight and with the power he has. I mean, Rosholt can't take getting hit that poorly against somebody like Pelele because it's only gonna take one big uppercut or one straight right and that moment of turning your head and he'll land another shot and put the fight away.
Just to qualify my earlier statement, I tried to be specific on scrambles and transitions because I think when Rosholt secures the takedown, doesn't half get it, doesn't transition, he's still working on it. When he gets someone completely flat on their back and establishes his base on top, that is bad for
Yeah,
everybody. So I think in that position, Pelele's in big trouble. I think
yeah,
obviously that's the worst position he can be in. Everything either after, if there is an escape, or leading up to that point, which partly takes place on the feet. If he has he's got to be as slippery as possible, and I do think that's going to be super key for him is how well he does in all the transitions that precede Rosholt securing a take, because he is just big, beefy, talented, and he does move very well, and he seems extremely knowledgeable in that top position. So everything that precedes that, I think, is going to be real key for Pelele, and I think he'll do pretty well there. Hi. Hi? There you go. I froze Zane Simon and put him to sleep. It's really not the first time that's happened. All right, hopefully he'll show back up. Actually, this is a little surprising, at least to me. My first glance at the betting lines, Rosholt is favored here, minus 150. Let's see, a low of minus 147, a high of 155, where Pelele is not far behind at plus 130, a low of plus 120. So that is mildly surprising to me. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the main event solo, even though we discussed it a little bit in the intro. James Huna and Nate Marquardt. I've always thought this is bear with me here because this is a pretty loose comparison, but he kind of reminded me of a mini Junior Dos Santos. I guess mostly just because mostly a boxer, but a real talented one, and one that threw in combination and was able to throw big knockout power without being sloppy and without leaving himself wide open to counterfire. And maybe the more he kind of developed his takedown defense and started to stave off shots that way, he kind of, I don't know, fits that mold a little bit. I'm a real old school Nate Marquardt fan, going back to the Pancrase days. And I mean, make no mistake about it, Nate is a phenomenal submission grappler. That's also why I always distinguish wrestling and grappling separately, because Nate's not a poor wrestler, but he's a phenomenal submission grappler. And it's really not in the traditional sense because he is not always that deadly off his back. He's capable off his back, but maybe this is a little bit prescient to the future and how fights would be judged, but he rarely spent any time on his back. Kind of like Jake Shields. Jake has an excellent guard game, but you rarely see it because he always hits a sweep and either escapes or gets on top. Marquardt is stifling from the top, extremely technical, vastly experienced. I think he's going to have a lot of trouble putting Huna on his back here.
hello,
Some of that. Hi, welcome back.
hello.
I was actually
Sorry.
having, no offense, I didn't miss you. I was actually having fun just sitting here talking to Chewy. But
Okay.
welcome
Well,
back. I was actually just rambling on to Huna and Marquardt, even though we
okay.
had talked a little bit about it. The quick overview is kind of what we talked about in the intro. I think Tehuna's a great boxer. I've likened him to kind of a mini JDS in the past. I realize that's kind of a questionable correlation, but I think Marquardt is a phenomenal grappler, not in the traditional BJJ sense. Phenomenal top game, not always so deadly off his back. Not a bad wrestler, but not a super deadly wrestler. And I think he's going to have a lot of problems generating any offense here because he doesn't have a lot of range weapons. He's kind of gone away from his low kick. So I'm thinking Tuhuna is going to be able to keep him at bay and just keep wheeling out combinations until he falls over.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I basically see it like Tahuna's just too big and too strong and too powerful a hitter for Marquardt to implement his game because Marquardt will mix it up on the feet. He'll get in there and, he's not defensively unsound or anything, but he's gonna, he's not the kind of guy who's just gonna go in and shoot takedown after takedown after takedown. He'll stay at range and try and, kickbox Tahuna for a while. And Tahuna's the kind of guy who will take chances to get a big punch or to land a powerful strike. And except for that Shogun loss where Shogun really just cracked him, in a way that we haven't seen Shogun crack many people recently at all. I don't, it was kind of shocking that Shogun all of a sudden pulled that out of his arsenal that hasn't been there for a few years. Um, we haven't seen Tahuna really show a really terrible chin, and so if Tahuna's chin holds up, Marquardt has looked anything but solid lately, and I think a couple of big exchanges in the first round, and that's probably going to be the fight.
On Tuhuna's chin, it's been quite the opposite, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Because he's shown a really solid chin. And I'm actually glad you brought up Marquardt's striking defense because it's really, really sound and solid. To me, it seems like Marquardt, he's skilled and he's diverse when he's kickboxing, but it seems to me he's going to have to move into the phone booth because Marquardt does most of his damage with his hands, his punches and elbows, even knees in close range. I think that's going to be obvious that Tahuna is going to want to keep him. He can deal with short exchanges at toe-to-toe range, but he's going to know that's one step closer to a clinch. All those areas he doesn't want to be. So to me, Tahuna's going to circle, keep him on the outside, and pick his spots to come in and be aggressive without leaving himself wide open. I don't know if he can knock Nate out. Nate, I want to say, has not been finished often.
He's been
This,
finished by first round knockout in his last two fights.
yeah, but I mean, so how many fights does he have, career-wise? I mean, he was always known as a real durable cat.
Yeah, but that changes over time. I mean, that's the thing that you see is as a fighter gets older and gets more worn down and ages, they get more fragile. That
Yeah,
that
I got you, and I know he's been like that, but that's almost why I wanted to establish that before that he had a rep for being, you know, pretty difficult to finish.
Oh yeah, no, I mean before that, Anderson Silva knocked him out, and that was it.
Yeah, okay, because
So
I,
I
I
mean,
couldn't think of another. Which
you
is,
don't get more durable than that.
and if anyone is maybe not super familiar with Nate Marquardt, just look up his record and look in some of the names, the quantity and quality of his resume. It's kind of he's been around forever. I remember, I think it was the first fight night ever on Spike TV. God, who was that he fight? That he fought. I can see his face right now. The guy that hit the back crank on Tony Frickland. His name is literally on the tip of my
Dean
tongue right
Lister?
now.
No,
No,
Ivan Salivary.
Ivan Salivary, and
Back in
everyone.
the Salivary position. There you go.
Yep, and everyone was so excited about that, and that was just a very, very disappointing fight. It took Nate a long time to live that one down, but either way, Nate's been around forever. I mean, there's no question he's at the tail end of his game here. I think this is a really tough matchup. I'm kind of hoping he doesn't get finished. You know,
If he doesn't, he's got a much better chance of winning because I think he's probably got a bit better gas tank and he's got all the veteran tools to, when he starts getting into rounds 3, 4, and 5 to actually put together a pretty functional game plan throughout.
I'm glad I forgot that this was a 5 rounder, and I think as that goes on, not only will those more of those opportunities arise for Nate, but I think that Tahuna will probably push more and more to be more aggressive and look for a finish if he hasn't gotten it within a couple rounds. Actually, that kind of makes it a little more interesting. Again, not for the fans, that's bad from an excitement point of view, but I do think that Nate's chances, veteran savvy, his experience, and his submission acumen give him a bit of a leg up as the fight goes on.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of it is that Tahuna has shown himself eventually to be a fairly limited fighter in terms of what he does. He mostly boxes and he punches really hard, and in truth, he's mostly a phone booth fighter. He mostly gets inside and tries to hit tight hooks and uppercuts. I mean, he's not really a long range guy. So Marquardt has a good chance. I'm just saying. I mean, if it were just about styles, if this fight were 5 years ago, I think Marquardt would win it without a lot of trouble.
Agree.
But Marquardt today and the way he's gotten knocked out lately, I just have zero faith in his ability to take a punch from somebody who hits as hard as Tahuna does.
And Tahuna's takedown defense to me has really come along and become a really reliable complement to his striking game.
Yeah.
And I've always thought boxing, I mean, it's the old Chuck Liddell thing. I think boxing is the best complement to sprawl and brawl because your hands are right there, easily adjusted. You can go from defending to throwing punches to cramming an underhook. You're on balance, usually squared off. So, but that is kind of intriguing. That I guess I don't even know, but 5 round is every main event a 5 round fight now? Because they said
Yeah.
that a while ago. I planned on it, and then I started talking like it was a 5 round fight, and then it turned out they hadn't instituted
It No, yeah, they had a brief testing out period where they said, okay, all main events are going to be 5 rounds except for the ones we've already booked, which is probably where that came in. So, you're like, oh, it's going to be 5 rounds. Like, no, they'd already booked that one months out, and so it's a 3 round fight. Um, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then, but over the past year, every main event, and maybe even past, I think maybe just the past year, maybe the past year and a half, every main event's been 5 rounds, unless it was booked as a 3 round fight and then bumped to the main event at the last minute.
I got you. So as we're talking here, I think in my mind, Marquardt's chances have really gone up. Has Tahuna ever fought in a 5 rounder before?
I do not think Tahuna has ever main evented a card.
I don't think he
No.
has either.
He's certainly not
And
main evented a pay-per-view, and that would be kind of insane. And the fight night cards he's been on none of them have been headlined by him. So he's never been in a 5 round fight. No.
in Nate's, that's it's weird because I can see Tahuna is as effective as it is. His pretty much boxing, boxing and sprawling.
Yep.
That does, you know what I mean? I mean, that's good for 3 rounds, but I think the basicness of that will kind of be emphasized over 5 rounds, and every little chance Nate has to win the fight will really increase, especially considering how tough Nate is. The old Nate was to finish. If it's that time when his chin's starting to get to that point, that changes everything. But I'm actually seeing a much better case for Marquardt now that we talked this through than before. Betting lines have Tahuna favored -220. Let's see, 205, -210. Pretty strong favorite with Marquardt at +180, plus between 167 and +180. So I don't know. I kind of like talking that out. We probably lulled everybody to sleep, but I enjoyed that discourse because now I have a little bit of a different take on that fight. So I'm looking forward to that one. You're still not?
Well, I mean, let me put it this way: it should be an interesting fight to watch, but I'm not invested that much in either fighter at this point. So, like, I just doesn't. It doesn't grab me. It's like the Jake Matthews Deshawn Johnson fight. It's like, yeah, it should play out as an interesting fight, but I'm not super invested in Deshawn Johnson or Jake Matthews. I don't have, I mean, I'm not like they're not guys who are potentially like, oh, I'm really excited to see what they do next. I mean,
It's the
I
relevancy versus excitement slash entertainment ratio, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of fights that may not end up, that may not end up looking all that interesting, end up being fun fights to watch. I'm not saying it's going to be fun, not going to be fun. It's just like if I'm looking at fights on this card where I'm like, oh, I really want to see how this fight plays out. Pelele Rochalt, I really want to see how that fight plays out. I want to see if Pelele can keep his run going, and I want to see if Rochalt can develop enough more of a striking game to be competitive against guys like Pelele. That's something I'm interested in seeing with Huna Marquardt. It's sort of like, well, have the wheels really fallen off Marquardt yet? And is Tahuna going to be a more effective brawler at middleweight?
And the question of how it will play out is a big part of like pre-fight anticipation for me. And I mean Oliveira Hioki, that's one where I'm just not sure how it could turn out many ways because they're both pretty
Yeah.
dynamic. And that's the one that I'm really intrigued to see if Hioki lays back, if Oliveira is ultra aggressive, or what kind of changes. I think both of those guys might be due for not a major, but a methodical, calculated change in style at this point. So, all right, let's wrap this bad boy up. Any closing, whatever thoughts, comments, statements, addresses to the union?
No, not nothing big. Are you actually going to stay up and watch this one?
No, I am
No.
not. I stayed up all night last. I'm a
Yeah.
little thin on sleep, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna
I'm
have.
I'm considering it. I'm considering staying up until 4 in the morning and watching it. But it's a tough sell. I mean, I'll certainly watch it tomorrow on Fight Pass, no matter what. But
That's one beauty of Fight Pass because
yeah,
with the advent of that, yes, that made the decision for me clearly. But yeah, so I was up late working with my computer crap. I've been up doing videos since I can remember today, and now I got 3 of them to post yet today. So it's good times, good times. Thanks for joining me once again. I'm sure we'll encounter each other one day in the future.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, one day in this vast wasteland that we think of as the internet, maybe our paths will cross.
One day, my friends, you heard it. All right,
That's what
thanks
it
for
is.
watching. If you dared to, Zane, take it easy. Have a good weekend.
You too, man.
Bye, y'all.